Hello, welcome back. I hope you're doing very well. I've seen quite a few questions on Facebook about mastering and exporting songs from the Force. I've also had questions from Patreon supporters about it as well, so I thought I would do a little video on that today. One massive caveat, I am not a mix engineer and I am certainly not a mastering engineer. So take what I say with a pinch of salt. I'm going to show you the tools and techniques that you can use within the Force to do the job of mastering and exporting a song. Once you understand how all that works, I definitely recommend watching videos of actual mastering tutors that will teach you what you should be doing when you're trying to master something. So we're going to look at the tools and the process as opposed to the technique to a degree. So to do that, I have got a project here. It's a live recording I made for a performance video a while ago. When I put that video up, I exported each of these tracks as audio files and I did the mixing in Ableton. So this has had no mastering, processing done to it really. So we're starting from complete scratch here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this arrangement of 9 different tracks. And we're going to look at gain staging to make sure the levels of the tracks are correct. And then we're going to look at the mastering chain or some effects you can put in your master channel to do the job of mastering. I keep doing that because I'm worried that I don't know what I'm talking about with mastering. And then I'm going to show you how to apply a fade to the end and a little bit of silence afterwards, which you should do if you're uploading to streaming services. So we're going to do all of that. You can see that this project has got 9 tracks in it, which is quite small. So I would be happy working on this with individual tracks. If the project was much bigger, say it had 20 different tracks or 20 different instruments in it, I would probably group them into submixes because it makes the fine sort of tuning balance bit of getting your levels or gain staging right easier if you use submixes. Now, if you don't know what submixes are, I did a big deep dive tutorial on that a few months ago, and I will put links to it somewhere so you can watch that. But we're going to stick with just using individual tracks here. So the first thing we need to do before we can move on to anything on the master channel is to make sure our gain staging is right. And what gain staging means, if you've not used the term before, it's just making sure that the gain of our individual tracks, when combined, produces a signal level that we're able to process well on our master channel. One of the things we're going to do on our master bus for our mastering is apply a maximizer, which is basically a brick wall compressor. And the job that effect does is it reduces the gap or the size between the loudest and the quietest parts of your signal. So it essentially squashes the signal. And by doing that, it allows the plugin to bring up the overall volume of the signal to make it louder. So basically, dynamic range is the distance between the loudest and the quietest. It reduces the dynamic range but brings the overall signal up, which makes it louder and it squashes the signal. And there is a balancing act in that between retaining enough dynamic range so that your track, you can discern the quiet bits from the loud bits, but that the overall signal is loud enough that it basically sounds punchy and alive. And that's one of the bits that a mastering engineer needs to show you how to do, because I often rely on presets, to be honest, and my ears to a degree. But in order for that to work, sorry, I'm rambling. In order for that maximizer to work, the signal hitting it needs to have enough headroom or enough latitude that the maximizer can apply gain without clipping. So we need to make sure that all of our tracks, when combined, add up to a signal which the maximizer can work with. So to do that, what we're going to do is look at our arrangement and find the busiest bit of it. And you can see here from about there that all of the elements are playing at the same time. So this is essentially our loudest part of the track. So this is a good place to test. So what we're going to do is play from there and then look at the mixer. when you're in the arranger, just a little bit of a tip. If you were to press play, it by default plays from the beginning of the track. But if you press shift and play, it will play from wherever the playhead is. So what we're going to do now is go to our mixer and look at our volumes. Everything seems fine there. So what we're going to do is look at our master track, and you can see that our master track is coming in somewhere between -9 and -3, and that's perfect. The kind of, if you were sending a mix off to a mastering engineer, they would generally ask for about 6 dB of headroom. So basically they want the peaks of the track or peaks of the mix to be hitting somewhere around -6 dB, which allows enough room for the maximizer to work. So our mix is okay. If you check yours and you're up here somewhere, what you would need to do is basically go back into your mix and collectively bring your levels down so that you retain the shape and the sound of the mix that you've created, but the overall volume of it is, or the overall signal level of it is coming in somewhere around -3 to -6. So that's the first step. So once you've got that done, you can then move on to the effects chain that we're going to apply to our master channel. So these effects, because they're on the master chain, they're going to be applied to the mix as a whole. Generally speaking, the first thing you would do is apply an EQ and a filter, sorry, a parametric EQ, which is under the EQ filter section. Now this again is one of the bits of mastering. Traditionally when you master something, it would be sent off to the mix would be sent off to a new person who listens to it on a calibrated room with fresh ears, and they can say that mix needs more bass, that needs less, that needs more presence, whatever. We're doing this all ourselves, and it's a completely subjective thing. It depends what you're listening to, whether your room's calibrated, blah, blah, blah. But a commonly occurring situation is that you are mixing, or you're trying to master a mix you've been working on for days. So you already know how it sounds, and you've probably got it sounding as good as you can in terms of its EQ balance, shall we say. So you might end up not changing anything here, but it's still important to have it here for a bit later on in the stage. So we're going to put the parametric EQ in, even if we don't use it at this point. The second thing that you would put in, I would put into this chain, is some sort of saturation. Now, when I'm doing this kind of bit of work in Ableton Live, I use Ozone by Isotope, which is like a sort of a self-contained mastering suite. And it has a tape saturation plugin, and I've never put a mix together that didn't sound better with some saturation on it. So I'm going to do that here. We don't have a specific mastering saturation effect in the Force at the moment, if you're listening, Akai. So what we're going to do is go to Harmonic, and we're actually going to put Flavor Pro in. Now, we think of the Flavor Pro as being a lo-fi kind of crunchy thing, but it works in that way based on the collection of settings that you have here. But I can't remember where this is now. Which one is it? If you go down, we've got a reel-to-reel. There it is, reel-to-reel. So this reel-to-reel preset on the Air Flavor thing is actually capable of producing quite nice tape saturation. Now, while flutter is basically the wobbly effect, we obviously don't want that on our master channel, and we don't want tape noise either. We just want saturation. So the two controls that we're going to mess around with are the timbre and the distortion. So if we go back to our mix, to our arranger, and wrong one, and just get this playing again, then go back to the mixer. Obviously that's no good, but if we start to bring the timbre down, bring distortion up, we can start to add something that resembles a bit of tape saturation. Now, I'm not going to go into this process too much. Again, it's something that it's entirely subjective, and you might not even use it every time. I think it sounds better every time. That's just my approach to it or my taste. The way I do this is I put very small amounts of distortion and timbre on until it starts to sound to me like it sounds better with it on than with it off. That's my simplistic approach to it. When I get the balance right, I think, no, that sounds better with it on. So I leave it on. And that's basically, I suppose, a beginner's sort of good practice is just apply things. If it sounds better, leave it on. If it doesn't, take it off. But that's what I do with the saturation. So what I'm trying to do here is emulate the tape saturation plugin that's in the Ozone master chain. So if you've ever used that, then you'll know what I'm talking about. So the last thing we're going to do is apply the maximizer. So we put that in a third slot. It's under dynamics and we go to air maximizer. And you can see if we tap in here, there are, come on, force. There are a bunch of different presets for it. It would appear, or it would seem evident that mastering light is a good place to start. So if we listen to our mix, let's go back to the arranger and jump into our, sorry, I just headbutted the camera. Okay, mixer. This is our master. So basically what we've got is input and output levels and gain reduction. So when we turn it off, we can see that things are a lot quieter. So the maximizer is adding volume and it's also adding some squash as well. So if we go back to the volume, you can see that our output level on the master track is now just somewhere below 0. Now, one of the things with mastering, especially if you're going to release the track onto something like Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, there are a couple of things going on here, and one of which you need to understand is perceived loudness. So how loud a track is cannot, as in how many decibels of loudness it is, can't necessarily be perceived by looking at the meter here. There is a standard loudness measurement which is called LUFS, which I can't remember what that stands for. And things like Spotify and Apple Music, they have a loudness standard of -14 LUFS. So basically, when you produce a track, you send it off to them, and its loudness level needs to be -14 or lower. If it's higher than that, then they will apply extra compression or gain reduction to your track, and it won't sound the way you have designed it to sound. And that's one of the big drawbacks of trying to master on the Force is we don't have any way in the box of measuring what our loudness level is. The only tip I can give you for that is when you're adding the maximizer to your chain and you're basically getting your settings right on this, is to err on the side of caution, to err down a little bit, so that you're not squashing the hell out of your track and making it as loud as possible if you intend to release it. Because if you do, if it's really squashed, if you've got really heavy compression, loads of gain reduction, when you upload it to Spotify or to Apple Music, if it's too loud, they will apply even more compression to it and it will end up sounding like a squashed mess. So basically, err on the side of caution, don't push it to the maximum, just get it sounding good, but give yourself a little bit of headroom. Headroom is such an important concept, a little bit of room left in your mix. So again, the maximizer has got pretty standard controls. They're the same controls that you would see in a compressor. So if you understand a compressor, you'll understand a maximizer. I'm not going to go into this in huge detail. Again, watch In the Mix or Dan Worrell's tutorials to understand how to use the compressor, the maximizer, to get it to sound as good as possible. And I will leave that to more qualified people to talk about the technique of it. But so you'll see here, we've now got parametric EQ, which we're not using at the moment, some saturation, and a maximizer, which basically should have done the job of gelling all of our mix together, getting it up to the correct volume level, and adding a little bit of saturation to just gel everything together and make it sound a bit more exciting. Our parametric EQ, when you bounce this mix out, if you listen to it on your car stereo or your boom box or whatever, and it doesn't sound right, this is where you would then start to go back and use the EQ to adjust the balance. If it sounds good on your studio monitors but sounds too bassy on your car stereo, you might want to go into your parametric EQ and just add a little bit of a low shelf to bring some of the bass out. Again, these are things that are completely subjective. These are the tools you would use to fix those problems if they were there. So I think I'm going to leave that bit of it here now because I'm getting into territory I don't understand well enough to explain to you. Okay, before we export this, the last thing we want to do is apply a fade to the end of the track so it kind of disappears or fades out nicely. I didn't do that on the individual tracks when I made this because I knew I was going to do the mixing in Ableton Live. So the easiest way to do that is to apply an automation or volume automation to the master channel so that it fades out nicely. So we're going to go to the mixer and press the tab to bring up the master page. And under outputs 1 and 2, which is our master channel, we just tap the automation icon so that it turns red, which means it's going to record whatever automation we apply. So go back to the arranger and then figure out where we want our fade to start and put the playhead slightly before it. And then we're going to get it playing, and then we're going to switch over to the master channel and just turn the volume down to record that decrease in volume. So shift and play. We now press the tab to go to our master channel, which is here, and just gradually turn this down to apply our fade out, like so. Now you can see here that at the end we've ended at 82.149, which is important to remember. But before we deal with that, we're just going to go back to our mixer and put our master output in read mode, which now means it's going to read the automation when it plays that we just put on there. So if we go back to the arranger and we just step back to about here, we should be able to hear that automation play that we just recorded. Anytime now, there it is. We've got our nice fade. So what did we say? 81, let's say 80, let's call it 82 dead. So if we were to export up to 82, that would now give us our full track, and it would give us a little bit of silence at the end, which is exactly what we want. So to do that, we're going to go to the save menu, press and hold save, and audio mix down, and stereo output, which is what we want, and file format, WAV. This is, you'd set this to whatever you were working in. The important thing is to go down to, sorry, that was a postman just knocking at my door. The end point, which was 82, which was the bit of, or the end of the arrangement, which gave us the nice fade and the bit of silence at the end. So we're exporting our entire mix from the first bar to the end of bar 82, which gives us our whole thing, plus a fade, plus a little bit of silence, which you could now upload. So we just press export and tell it where we want to export it to. Andy projects, yeah, so this is the track, the folder that the track is in, so I would just call it DNY bounce. There we go, bosh, and it will chew through it. So as it's exporting, just one little note, once this comes out, what I would normally do is listen to it on different headphones, like consumer headphones, big bassy beats, or listen to it on your studio monitors, your studio headphones, listen to it on your car stereo, any number of different systems, and just make notes about how it sounds on each of those. If it's too bassy on your car stereo but sounds good on your hi-fi, you might want to go back and then look at the EQ that we applied to the master channel and just balance that. So what you're trying to do is to get it to sound as good as it possibly can across a range of different things, which basically means making compromises. That is the whole mastering process, and someone who is much more qualified than me needs to teach you how to do that properly. But anyway, I hope that was useful. Basically, what we've looked at is gain staging, applying a mastering chain to your master channel, and then applying a fade and some silence at the end of the track, and then exporting a bounce for analysis and uploading. I hope that was useful to the people that asked about the mastering process. As I said, take what I've said on the technique with a pinch of salt, but those are the tools that you have to work with on the Force. Fingers crossed one day Akai add a LUFS meter so we can actually know the loudness of the tracks that we're exporting. I think then it will become something where you can literally go from Force to Spotify, Force to Apple Music. But until then, we do run the risk of getting our volumes wrong and having extra compression applied by the streaming services. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.